We're asked to find the domain and the range for the function. So if we look at y equals x squared minus 5, there are no restrictions on what we can substitute in for x. Anything, number that you can imagine, you can always square it and then subtract 5. So the domain for y equals x squared minus 5 is all real numbers. Now the mathematical way to write that answer in interval notation is negative infinity to infinity. So that's how we're going to write our answers. The range for y equals x squared minus 5 is what answers we're going to get out when we substitute in any real number for x. So a good way to think about this is to look at the graph of y equals x squared minus 5. This is a parabola that is shifted down 5 units. So our graph would look something like this. So note that we have a minimum value of negative 5. So that means that our range is going to be all real numbers that are greater than or equal to negative 5. And in interval notation, we're going to write bracket negative 5 to show it includes the negative 5, and then we're going to go to infinity. On the next example, f of x is equal to the square root of x plus 1. And so our domain is going to be all the numbers for which f of x equals the square root of x plus 1 is defined. Now on this example, we are going to have a restriction because we know that you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So that means that in this function, x plus 1 must be greater than or equal to 0, which means that x has to be greater than or equal to negative 1. So writing that answer in interval notation, we'll write bracket negative 1 to infinity for our domain. For the range, when we plug in the numbers all the way from negative 1 to infinity, the lowest number that we're going to get is 0. When you substitute negative 1 in for x, negative 1 plus 1 is 0, and the square root of 0 is 0. So that means our range is going to be all the real numbers greater than or equal to 0. So in interval notation, we're going to write 0 to infinity. You could also look at the graph of this function. This would be a square root function that would begin at negative 1, and the graph would look something like this. So you can see that your domain is all real numbers greater than or equal to negative 1, and your range is all real numbers greater than or equal to 0.